All right, if you came here for project estimation, I'm here. Just kind of get an idea of the audience. How many developer types? Okay, project managers. All right, business owners. All right, and that kind of gets us. So, my background. I spent like 15 years in manufacturing, working in construction. In 2004, I sold my business and became a consultant for a accounting firm that had sold me software. And of course, accounting systems, you wind up needing to do reports. So, grabbed a role that I'd studied for when I went to college and became a developer, working with developing accounting and reporting applications. And over the last 7 years, worked as a project manager, worked in a number of different languages. If you do development, I've done C#, Delphi, PHP, iOS, some Java, JavaScript, whatever kind of it takes. At some point you kind of get to that. So I did put recovering developer, so I have all of the like OCD and things that you have as a developer, and are used to really like asking the same question like 50 times. So it works pretty good for that, and probably because I didn't know better, I got involved with some internet startups where we're spending large amounts of money. We're working with cross-discipline teams. And worked on some substantial development there over a number of different projects. So, managing projects, I've managed, the $500 project, I've managed the $1 million project. So, when I looked at that, and I looked back at what are the powerful things about that could do better and where does it go off tracks, the part that really speaks to me, because I do project management, is how are we estimating? Estimating happens very early. Estimating happens every week when I'm planning what I'm doing. Estimating happens when I'm responding to RFPs. It's this thing, it just pervades everything. So, I was talking about, it is a Drupal event, so why does this belong in Drupal? Having done custom projects, one of the things is, I have the pain of custom code. Is I have done custom projects and things that you get with Drupal, like login and user management. They're there when I start. I have spent weeks managing a team to code that up. So, what I look for is how can I get that pain of custom code addressed? How can I deliver my projects predictably, which is invariably what the customer asks for. How can I get that value sooner? And the thing is, when you're working with the clients, is you really don't get paid anymore for spending. The customer doesn't appreciate a user login system that you spend 3 months coding versus one you click into existence if the functionality is the same. And the really scary thing about now is if you are coding it up by hand, you are competing with someone that's doing Drupal or some other framework that is able to deliver that value really quickly. So this is the two types of activities. This is what I have added really recently that's really become clear to me when I'm estimating projects, is you have two types of activities, which are highly structured activities. These are things we know all the steps for. If you've been around programming, you'll hear the house building analogy. It's like building a house. Software is really not like building a house. Don't let anyone run you down that analogy. Making a sandwich, highly structured. Give me 2 slices of bread. I slather some mayonnaise on it. I get some lettuce. I put the meat on it. It's very structured. We can know about the steps of that. Software is a loosely structured thing, and Drupal helps us kind of bridge that gap of things that I can predict and things that I can know. So when I'm estimating, I'm always thinking is, Is this something really structured I know how to do well, that my company knows how to do well, I know someone who knows how to do well, or is this a research project? So, all right, estimating sucks. Why does it suck? Well, it's never going to be correct anyway. It's like, why should we do that? I guarantee you, if I go into the dev team and ask them, when we start laying it out, and they're like, well, it's not going to take that time. If you sat in on the media presentation about organizing your queue, it's like, it's not going to be this way anyway. Coders hate it. If you are a developer, you just hate being asked for an estimate. It's really important because this is what is going to set the expectation with your customer and with your team. Hey Lee, how long does it take to add this module? I need you to set up services to give me this JSON request. If he tells me half a day and it takes 3 days, he's going to be unhappy, I'm going to be unhappy, the customer is going to be unhappy. If you have a good estimate and you've laid out all the tasks, it provides a way for a project manager to come in after you have worked on the estimate, look at that and go, yes, these are the steps I need. Let's manage the project this way. Skipping this road. Skipping this is the road to hell. There is, let me see, I'm going to go a little bit quicker here. Sorry. NASA has a list of 100 rules for project managers, and one of the things they list there is, like rule 15, is that most projects, you can tell they are going to fail at the very beginning. Is when you go back and you do a post-mortem, it's like, we missed something, we didn't look at this was obvious at the beginning. If we had stopped, if we had looked and seen that lens was calculated incorrectly, we would not have put it in the Hubble Space Telescope. We went along and we predicted it. Good estimates increase your morale. Like I said, they work with your reputation. And the thing about business is basically, as we're estimating, I find that our business, we either do mostly Drupal requirements or asking for, fixed bid type projects. How much will this take for me to get this amount of functionality done? Here's my RFP. You respond to me, you need to deliver that. Or, it's a time and materials build. But even at time and materials, there's some expectation that I'm going to have some deliverable at the end of this. I'm going to have a document. I'm going to have some estimate of a level of expectation of what it takes to get to the next phase of what I need to do. And unless in your estimate you account for that level of effort and you plan to make a profit at the end of it, there really isn't going to be any there. There may not be any if you plan for it, but there certainly will not be if you don't put it in on the beginning. And the most important one for me is, it keeps you from taking bad projects. If you look at the project, you've estimated, it's obvious it's not a match for you and your customer, and you can determine that up front. That is like the most important thing. It keeps you from wasting time, keeps them from wasting time, keeps you from being in a project that is horrible. Wanted to talk a little bit about workflows of what people expect, and many, especially as I get into business organizations, maybe people that have not involved with software before, they believe in a very much waterfall kind of flow. You get this sales lead, you engage them, you discover it, you design, we develop it, and we deliver it, and there's profit at the end. It's just this one thing, they start it, and they work. It's very much this waterfall kind of flow. The thing you'll hear in software is kind of this bottom agile flow. And in a very short term, agile approaches a very waterfall kind of thing, except we've sliced the thing very small. We picked off 2 weeks or 3 weeks, whatever you think your Scrum or your next sprint is going to be. And although we can move things in the backlog, we have a pretty high confidence about our ability to achieve something. I put fragile in here. I've worked in a couple organizations that use this, and it's not as helpful if we don't involve the client when we're actually deploying them and giving them a chance to review as we're having these cycles. On very large, smaller projects or more, you can do that with. As you get larger, it's just virtually impossible to work without having that input from the client. I'll back up just a moment. What I'm trying to do here is, of course, we've only got an hour. Estimating is an extremely large topic. So I would like to say, I've found this really great tool. You plug your project into it. You press a button. You can download it at Drupal.io. You can and your estimate comes out there. What I've really found is, and I developed this with several other people I've worked with, is there's kind of 6 steps that we go through, and it's all hard work along the way. Because we are doing work that is not highly structured. Even with Drupal, we've got 8,000 modules, some huge number. We have some amount of predictability, but working with different types of software, I go through, and my teams, we go through the same process, and it's really kind of low tech, much like the Media Current presentation they did. It's really more of a strategy and how you think about estimation that works better for the companies that I've been working with. And the good news is, it's easier to estimate work than it is to actually do it. The other good news is clients will generally pay for design work. If you have a problem, you generally realize that. You would, if a customer can go buy box software or a service, they probably should. If they have a unique problem, they realize that this is not something that you can just get off the shelf. Projects I'm working on, I probably get more of those requests kind of at the smaller numbers, the $5,000 projects. Someone may be doing something that they could go buy somewhere else. When you talk to someone that's going to spend $50,000, $100,000, $200,000, they know they got a problem, and they are much more receptive to the conversation of, we need to figure out what you need here. Design and discovery, in my estimation and based on books, is that these are really the highest value add in the process. And the project I was just working on, we were bidding on an iPhone app against another company, and the other company had a bid of like $10,000. And so came in, did an analysis of what they were providing. The particular account manager I was working with is really awesome, and came in and said, well, we understand what you need here, but you're wanting an app to, basically it was a news app for conferences. Well, you're going to put on more than one conference. This conference is going to change. Do you want it to be able to change? Do you want to be able to do that in multiple platforms? What's your life cycle of this? There's some other features I've heard you talk about. When the project got through, that project's delivered, by the way, he competitive sold $100,000 worth of billable work against a $10,000 off-the-shelf system. And it's because he was willing to have that design and discovery discussion with his client, rather than just saying, yes, we can do the $10,000 project. because the client actually had a need that was larger than that one expenditure. All right, well, discovery is, I will get RFPs sometimes that we have to respond to, and sometimes it's in writing, sometimes it's a phone call, sometimes it's we need a meeting. And the client says something like, the successful vendor will provide a system that allows us to import inventory levels from a web interface. I just couldn't tell you what in the world that means. Does that mean we dump a text file up there? Does that mean you have a file browser for doing it? Does that mean you have an FTP folder? So that's an opportunity to have a discussion with a client about, let's discover what you really need. Because we got to discover what's the question you're really asking to begin with. I don't believe them. Right. Yeah, that's exactly it. If you've read the book on, I think it's on responsive design. It's the 37 Signals, the new book called Rework, and one of the quotes is from Henry Ford, and he says, if I asked people what they wanted for the car or for their carriage, they would have told me they wanted faster horses. And in software, we are supposed to be the professionals. We know what things are. The client may or may not know. So, I'm always kind of doubtful. I believe that they have a need, but what is the best fix for that need? And it may be specified in a way that, either is complex to deliver, is not really going to fit their needs. And finding that out, you do have to do it in a time frame that doesn't drive you broke. But asking that question about why do we want to do that is really important. There's my quote on the failed projects. Skipped on the design and discovery. Is you have to give it that enough effort that you're really sure that you've uncovered what that need is, that what you're going to deliver is actually what they're going to accept. This is my words. If it's a bad customer, you know it at that point. And, I'm a small business. I have been a small business owner. I know the thing about taking customers for cash flow. But, if it's going to be terrible and it's terrible up front, it's really better to know that when you're dating than when you're married. It's just yes.
So in this part that you're talking about, you say that you would engage do this kind of stuff before an actual billable work is just part of trying to qualify the customer, or are you saying you would attempt to get some sort of initial design discovery phase of the billable segment?
Really, two phases I'm looking for. Typically, if it's a large project and it's not well defined, I want to do a phase one that is a discovery. And I'll promise to deliver some documents. I'll deliver the estimate later, and it depends on the size. For a 150-hour brochure site, we've got one working right now. I know what that is. That doesn't bother me. If I see something and it looks like it's 500 hours or 1,000 hours, I'm pretty sure if it's 1,000 hours and we haven't spent 10% of that time or better figuring out what that 1,000 hours is about, there's no chance we know what it is. There's just none. So 6 steps. And this is kind of, what is the problem? This is the part we're asking, do we need design and discovery? Are the technologies involved? Do we know what those are? Is it standard Drupal? Is it Drupal on iPhone? Is it Drupal, iPhone, and some cloud service? What are those? Kind of the pain points. I'll look for. Are we hardware locked? If I'm working for, I do some work now for enterprise clients. They are very sticky about where their hosting is. Some of them say, you must work in our data center. Other folks may say, develop it on your side, you'll hand it off to us. Others may say, we're going to deliver this later. Can you guys manage it after it's delivered? You get full control. What does that look like? What really is the problem? The people or departments involved, hard to price this out, but I have worked in this a while, and you kind of need to be aware if there are going to be personalities that are going to be a challenge to work with. Worked with various spreadsheets and kind of tried to put multipliers on that, and that is a kind of a personal call, but we have 3 levels at the company I'm working at now, 4. Like easy, medium, difficult, and don't take the project. And that's really kind of an upfront thing. Yeah, right. And we're going to get just to that. And all right, the customer absolutely must be involved. I just won't work if the customer is going to just give me a spec and walk away. It can be one person. I will work with multiple people, but I have to have one decision maker that signs off, and that person is the final say. I just got through with like a 2,500-hour project. Was that way. I'm working on another one that's about the same size. Working with teams, working with committees, but you must give one person, and that is a really good way of keeping yourself from being. Teams will try to go around the decision maker and reach you directly, and it's really good to drive all that back to one person and one point of interaction. I'm happy to work with design teams, but in the end, I'm going to pick you and say, or you're going to tell me, and I've also got to believe that person actually has the authority to make the decision. Do they really have the corporate authority? Is there a boss behind them that's actually making the decision? I don't know. But I'll ask the question before I get there. Most of these things I've had a really painful, experience in the past. Like you told me that Joe has the authority, but Sherry, that's the VP over, really has the authority and comes in later and wants something different. So if I can find that out on the very beginning, I think Jeff Waffle had a thing about you have to know the politics of the situation of what company you're working with. And customers, design meetings, documents, that they're engaged when they tell you you're wrong. I never believe anything has one design cycle in it. I've never delivered a mock, a wireframe, or anything that was right the first time. And any time I hand that to a customer and they go, this is really good, I really don't believe they're playing. That's going to wind up very poorly because they're really not doing it. And I had a mentor at my first programming job that we had a meeting, and he said, well, if you're not going to look at it, I'm not going to be able to work on the project. I know we're not right. And it kind of recentered that conversation. And at the time, I just went, what? Michael. He goes, okay, if you're not going to look at it, there's no need to do the project. Second thing we do is we are working on even web or iPhone. I got like 10 minutes, so I'm going to have to run. We work with wireframes. Those should be lo-fi to begin with. And the reason for that is people have color preference, people have design preferences. If you do something that is grayscale, that is lo-fi, you can capture the screens that they have, and you won't get that like, oh, I hate that green color. It's like, well, I really like, if we could use pink, that would, or purple, that's my favorite color. I really like balsamic mock-ups. There's a lot of tools out there. I've used napkins, pencils. I've seen people mock up in Drupal. Whatever you got to do, get the wireframes. Really resist showing those on screen. If people see software or a Photoshop document that's on screen, they think you have coded it. They think it works. Do not do that. Each type of page, if you're working on a many page site, typically you have a number of widgets and you need to mock up what each one of those does. Call that out. And the mock-up should be a final part of the design document. We will even, I am called the tree killer at work. I print them out. I want the users to mark them up. The one person I'm working with must initial those when we get through with the meeting, or they might just send me a PDF and say, we accepted those. I will put the markup on there. We do some work virtual, and if we do that, we'll do call-outs. I will take a red pen, I'll mark, changed, put the meeting date on there. That has saved me so much pain. The power of your team. If you're working in teams of people or if you're working individually, I really encourage you to find someone else that doesn't trust you and help you to estimate. Teams I work with, typically, I don't do as much development as I do very little development, actually. Find someone who has done the work before. Drupal is fairly predictable about things. So I will say, how long do you think it will take to do this? Or the better question is, how long did it take the last time we did this? Couple things, don't poison the well. Don't say, I've got this crazy customer that wants this stupid thing. It's really better just to kind of give it very plain. Or if you think it's very easy, don't say, I've got this super easy thing. Because you're really looking for that feedback that is unbiased. 4, estimating time. If you read Jacob Pearson Node 1 has excellent presentations from DrupalCon. If you read Steve McConnell's book on software estimation, they'll talk about hours, use multiples of 2, 4, 8, 16. I only estimate in half days and days. And anything that's larger than 2 days, it's got to be broken down into something smaller. Because what I've found is if I go larger than 2 days for an activity, there are more activities in there that I haven't sufficiently broken down unless it really is a repetitive task. And usually those we're going to automate anyway. Again, 2 days, just wrong. Just if you see an estimate larger than that, that's not broken down with some detail behind it. We have a big integration task going right now. It's estimated at 4 weeks. We listed out each API we got to call to, each form we've got to build. Broke it down into, is that a half a day to do that? Is that a day to do it? Is it 2 days? If it's 2 days, then it's a lot of work. Can we break it down into something smaller? Working days. 4 hours and 8 hours, which is basically what the guys in the there's some complexity, and I'd be happy to talk to anybody, email or in person later when you get to estimating about how to add more complex, larger projects. Actually, for fixed bid, as I estimate days at 11 hours. Because Most developer estimates are about 30% under if they're very good, experienced developer estimates. You do have to build some time in there for what that is. Some things you will undershoot on estimates. Very few times, most of the time your estimate's always going to run over. If you look at an estimate curve, instead of being a bell curve, it's very flat on the left, and it's really close to where you start out as what you think your average is, and then they run way out. Estimates are the one thing where the loser wins. Having worked in construction, the guy who gets to build the house is the guy who forgot the green room on the back. Software is kind of the same way. If you don't really interrogate what the plans are and estimate it, you get the bid, and then you're on the hook for delivering it. Okay. We always have design. We talked about this. The other thing is when you get to the end, if the customer's made the choices and they understand what's going on, they're more willing to accept those compromises. So we use a method when we're breaking down a list. If you want to if you ever take PMI or you just want to sound good, you can tell them to use the Delphi wideband estimation method. It's basically where me and a colleague get together, or we actually don't get together in a room. We each make a separate list of the tasks that are necessary for the job, and then we have to make those separately, and then we get together and compare what our lists are. We'll use a two-person estimation. I'll pull in another project manager and have him estimate my project based on the list, and then he will interrogate mine. And it's not really an estimate unless you're arguing about what the numbers actually are. Same thing as the customer. I would bet pretty much everyone here, if we listed out what it would take to accomplish a project, those lists are going to be different. I might forget that we got to install it on the server. I might estimate theming smaller. Someone with a different, and if it's a very large estimate, I will probably chase the different parts of the estimate with a team. So I will have a theming person look at theming. I'll have the sysadmin look at sysadmin items, and that's what we're trying to uncover are things that we have forgotten or missed. So when we get through, we use that really excellent tool of Excel. Does anybody watch South Park, the Underwear Gnomes? Are you familiar with this story? The Underwear Gnomes, they have this thing for making profit. In phase 1 is they collect underwear. They don't know what phase 2 is, but phase 3 they're really sure is that there's profit at the end. So when I started, like most people, you wind up with this is a very simple list here. On more complex projects, I'll list out who the actual resource, if we're very close to doing that. If it's on the front end of a project, we will just list, we'll break that up into, sysadmin, developer, themer, PM, business analyst. And here, this is kind of like magical thinking, 4 days to implement a project. Yeah, I just have no idea what that is. So if you get more to something like, this is what setting up development is, we're going to set up the services module. If we've got these node services we're setting up in the design document, we're going to call out to that. We're going to have, this particular one was using XML, and the XML requests were listed out in there. I know what those are. I can look at that and I can say, yes, we've done that. It's been a half a day before. Yeah, I believe that. Okay, unstructured activities. How can you create a breakdown for something you haven't done? You just can't. You haven't done it before. Fair amount of time, this is the part you were asking about, is if I don't know what it is, that's where I have to ask for design time. I have to call someone else that's that's done it. Recently, I did a project. We're doing some responsive design work. I know some other people that have done that, so we subcontracted that work out and asked that person to. So it helps us kind of fix our cost on what the cost is going to run. You can hire training, or you can do a prototype. Do an ugly version of what you're trying to do, or a short version to estimate the time. These are my top pitfalls. One is I haven't discovered something. I didn't spend enough time discovering it, and all of a sudden, we discovered that there's like 4 pages behind another page, and it has this interaction that calls off to UberCart, and we didn't get the part that we needed to calculate the special shipping method, or over pessimistic, over optimistic. And the problem with the stuff you don't know is you just have no idea if you've missed half a day or if you missed 3 weeks. And that will inevitably turn into a phone call to the customer of, well, we ran into this thing and we didn't expect it, and that November 20 launch date's going to be more like December 20, and there's an explosion. It's just not good. So if you add it up and there is too much time, you got to go back to the customer and say, I had this phone call last week actually. What do you want to cut? You want a lot of stuff. This is your delivery date you want. I can't meet it unless we cut that smaller. If they've been involved in the design process, you don't get those things like, well, I just don't think that should take you 2 weeks to do that. This particular one's dependent on design, so we had, we deliver the mocks on this day, you have a revision, it takes us 5 days to do the revision, you have a second review, a couple days for that, how do we want? In some projects I end up buying. We want to learn how to do Android. So maybe I want to discount the project. I know that we're going to stink at doing it the first time. But don't sandbag the estimate before you get to this part. I will see people say, I really want to do that, man. That should take us 8 hours. Or really, if it's going to take you 40 hours, estimate it at 40 hours. And know that you're going to eat 32 of them. But make that as a cognitive decision as you're working. It's time to go back and look, did we really understand the solution? And if you still can't get there when you're estimating, hopefully you're not into the part where you've accepted the project. Then it's just time to say, I can't meet this deadline. The deadline's just, we're not going to be there. Media Current had a very good point on theirs about you can't deliver the project unless you have actually built in some buffer time. The only way that I can deliver it on a schedule is plan to be there days or weeks ahead of time. Planning to be there the exact day before gives you no time for nightmares. So this is our steps. Figure out what the problem, make a wireframe, get the customer to tell you why it's wrong, and you repeat that till they're exhausted. No, you really repeat it till you're not getting that feedback of this is wrong, and you should do that in several cycles. We'll break down that into a work breakdown, and we'll estimate the time on an Excel sheet. With teams that I've worked with for a while, some of that is more complex worksheet. We'll score for difficulty of the client. We may score for a particular resource if we're working for them and we know kind of their skill. We may score if it's an accelerated project about how much overtime do we have to burn. Use the people you work with to help you estimate. In your contract, you're going to have a list of declined, deferred, and discussed items. I would submit to you, you really need to put that list of things that you decided not to do and call those out explicitly. Say, we discussed having Rover's blog as a page, and that's not included in this project. You know, we discussed integrating with Salesforce forms, and that is not done in this phase. Not included here. Sometimes people's recollection of that is very selective, and if you haven't called that out, we will exclusively say if it's not in this this description of work, it is not included. It's saved me a lot of pain after I put it in. Several of the books I like for doing this, probably the best one that I use for this is Software Estimation by Steve McConnell. There's these are mostly development books, getting real software management, extreme programming, and the basic thing that I borrowed from those books are if we're estimating, we want to find the places where we fail as early or the places where we don't agree as early as we can, because if you let those go into the actual development and you haven't discovered them, it's just pain. All right, so we made it in 45 minutes, so I am open for questions. Mm-hmm. No. The last one. That's, you know, the software team really likes to run Agile. We like to run Scrum. We like to run in sprints. You know, I find that most customers, unless it's really an ongoing relationship, it is very hard. If someone else has a different experience, I'd love to know it. But most of the enterprise clients I've been with really want to have some kind of defined outcome at the end of that. The way that I will break that up is I will break that up into phases. Is break it up into this is the deliverable part that we see next, and this is the fixed amount for phase one, which includes these screens and this functionality. You know, your next phase is going to be your e-commerce integration, and we're going to and then we'll spec and we'll waterfall that section of it. You know, I'd like to say we do waterfall, but I just have not had good success with that. That's really excellent. Right. I had a very difficult conversation last week on a bid that we had where we were into phase one, and they had asked for we were providing the bid for phase two, and there's a discussion. I really had rather not put that in writing, but in this case, we had to put it in writing. You know, based on our experience on similar projects that appeared to be similar to this one, based on our understanding, you know, this could be between $50,000 and $70,000 to accomplish similar projects. Difference was this was an entirely different shopping cart, entirely different vendor. You know, that was a bid that we gave 2 months ago. The one that we gave last week was over $200,000, and you have to be able to explain what the difference is. I don't like those conversations. I really had rather stay at, you know, we don't know. But if I have to give an estimate, then I have to define. If I say $50,000 or $60,000, I have to define what that would include. And that one did explicitly say, you know, we don't know what your API is, we don't know what your exact needs are, we don't know what the licensing requirements are. You know, this is not a very accurate estimate. You know, we have done similar projects and all that's true, but it makes for kind of a heated conversation when you have an estimate. Your early estimate is, or your late estimate is 4 times what your early one is, and you're into tens of thousands of dollars. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard. Yes. I really like small phases up front so I can discover what they're like. What size projects are we talking about? Mm-hmm. It's going to take. It's good. So I'm working in teams, right, where we have generally, at least a developer, a themer, and a project manager, at least 3 of us. That's going to take more project management time. And if I feel like that's the case, instead of charging, 20% for project management time, I may charge 30% for time. And I would probably list some steps. There's some steps like wireframe acceptance and approval, content entry and approval, and I would list those out as what the client's duties are at that time. Client must provide content and enter it into the Drupal site. If I have a deadline to meet, I'll say must enter it by this time, or schedules dependent on that, and try to push that back on to them. I do work on more larger projects, mostly because I find the small projects are really challenging that way. It's hard to know. If we're just going to say, a $10,000 project is $100 an hour. It's 100 hours. It's not, that's like 2.5 weeks worth of time. At a lower rate, it's more time, but it's still not a huge amount. So specify the things they owe you. Specify the things that will hold you up. Content's the one I've really gotten stuck on that, where the client has to provide me that and they don't get it entered. I hate that one. Yeah, right. That's exactly right. I have also used building my site, my content types early, and they must enter the content before I get to the whole theming process. Because I can't see what I can't see how their content's going to look until I enter it. Yeah, that one stinks.
I'll make a comment on your, what you said so early on about having a decision maker.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that's true, but I would also say that in addition to that, one of the responsibilities of the client should be to provide access to their people. So you get sort of a true sense of what you're trying to build, and then have one decision.
Right. Right.
Because the things I've seen fail have been where everything that I got was through one person. There's a lot of times there's a backstory, they're trying to engineer something to cut somebody out of the decision process.
Yeah, and sometimes, depending on the project, I may either spend time with the client, or I may say, let's spend 10 hours and let's meet with your team. Let's take an afternoon and even on a $10,000 project, spend a day, spend 2 meetings, meet with the team. I have a small iPhone app that we're working on. We got the RFP. We looked very close to it, and we invested a couple hours and said, hey, can you bring the folks over that are interested in that? You've talked about these people. Let's see if this is. And I'm afraid you have to do some of that.
Yeah, you can probably tell that pretty quick. So meeting, we ask them for stuff, it takes
Yeah, if you can get some of those, to your question, if you can have some interaction up front where they've got to provide some things to you, you know, do they have design documents? Do they have, you know, anything about what they want, and see how they respond? Because, you know, some people are very good about it. You know, yeah, call Susan. She's got all that stuff. She knows how that's all entered. You know, she knows what that process is. If you get access, if you get feedback on that, then you have some feeling about it. If that person's never available or doesn't know what they want, that's probably a sign that they really don't know what they want. You know, it's not a priority for them. I've had a couple times where someone says, "We need this," but the people underneath did not want it.
As the complexity of a project kind of gets more intense, I've been sometimes lured into the idea of using some of that Microsoft project in order to kind of organize these thoughts, but I always fall back to the old spreadsheet. Any value in using more complicated project management tools?
Yeah. I have a love-hate with Microsoft projects. Sometimes it's a really beautiful road to hell. You know, it just maps it out and just expectations go. But you got to really, I mean, to use project, you really got to be defined. When I see a project that runs out like a year, I just don't believe it. I'd really rather break that up into 3-month phases, and even 3-month phases I don't believe so much. 6 weeks I can see in development pretty easy on maybe like a 4-man team, but things we don't know. And the thing I run into on long, like year-long projects is by the time we get through with the first 3 months of development or the first 6 months, what we want in the next 6 months changes because, you know, now I've got jQuery Mobile 1.1 release, and it'd be really nice if we had that, or, you know, there's a new module, or there's a new technology, or IE9 came out, and now all of our stuff's broken, you know, and it wasn't an expectation then. So all that I can, I really like to break my phases smaller if I can at all. Time is not your friend in software projects. Anything you can deliver quicker, faster, you know, design, discussion, and delivery, the closer those can be to each other, the better life is. Yeah, that's if I can. Microsoft project is really good for kind of getting my head around it, but you know that changes pretty much the moment you deliver it, and I'm not even sure it's true then. All right, one more question, we'll wrap up. I will.
But you also have a very big role in terms of here's what we're working on now, but you're also looking at what's next.
Right now I work with ProMet Solutions. We have 20 full-time folks, and we have another 20 that work in partial roles, so I have a relationship with all those, so I'm managing multiple projects at one time. Certainly if I have a deadline and it needs to get done, I'm not always the fastest developer, but I will hop on and do whatever I got to do to get that delivered by my delivery day. Depending on how many projects I have, that may or may not be an option. Last week I was in meetings like 25 hours, and the problem with 25 hours of meetings is it's like 25 hours of documentation after that. You know, so, but I did get a business analyst to join me for a meeting, so my meeting notes are much better whenever she has availability. So it's very nice. I'm available for questions, or you can reach me at johnny@johnnyfox.com and follow me on Twitter. Appreciate all of you being here. Thanks for coming to Drupal Camp. Getting into the last meeting of the day.